Hello, my loves. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going through some of my favorite Oracle decks or most used Oracle decks from 2024 in my personal practice. Now, I am also a professional tarot reader, Akashic priestess, spiritual leader, and mentor. And I do a lot of card work within my work in those categories. So I made a separate video for that, which is already out if you want to check that out. Some of the decks that I'm going to honorably mention, I talked at length about in that video, so we're not going to re-go over those. So if you are interested in those, check that out in the description. But we have quite a few decks that I want to share with you. So let's just dive in. Honorable mention decks that were in the other video were the Witches Familiar Oracle cards. And again, I talked about these at length. So I'll just direct you over there. The Wild Unknown Archetypes Oracle. The Seasons of the Witch Yule Oracle, which I'm actually going to talk about for a second. I lied. The Dreamgate Oracle, which was my most used deck for professional practice in 2024. So I'm going to set these aside. Really quick, I'm going to talk about the Seasons of the Witch Yule Oracle. I'm not going to go over the entire deck again, so definitely check out my spiel from before. But what I did want to say about this deck is this, I am very surprised, made it onto this list for me as one of my most used and favorite decks, because those of you who know me for a long time are very aware that I am not a Christmas person. Technically this is Yule, but we all know the associations between those two things. And for a long time, I really hated this deck. It would only give me like Father Christmas and like the really Christmassy leaning cards or Yule leaning cards. But I have grown to really love this deck for that internal winter season. A lot of the work I do, not just professionally, but a lot of the personal work I do has to do with internal transitions, with times of transitions, liminal spaces, not only communication within those liminal spaces to, of course, things in the unseen, but also to parts of myself, to this constant kind of regenerative identity cycle that I seem to be on. And while my little witchy heart and Scorpio sun just wants to have the Seasons of the Witch Samhain deck be my like soul deck out of this, the few decks I do have from this series, this Yule deck is actually the one that I use the most, because it represents that uncomfortable transitional time of like, okay, there has been the death of the old identity, but now who the hell am I? And you're going to see a lot of these types of themes repeating in the decks that I show you today, of that liminal space. So that's the Seasons of the Witch Yule Oracle. I go much more in depth of like why I like the deck, how I use it, etc. Again, like I said a million times already in the other video, but that's just how that kind of correlates to my personal practice. Along with that same energy, a deck that I really fell in love with this year was the Black Moon Lilith Oracle, the Cosmic Alchemy Oracle. I'm not saying the names of these people because I'm terrible with names. I will butcher the absolute living heck out of it. But this deck really surprised me in how much I enjoyed it. It's got this like purple galaxy feel. I do appreciate how this one shuffles. My preferences for cardstock is substantial yet flimsy and glossy, which is super unpopular, but you'll notice in a lot of these decks, they're either thin cardstock that I can shuffle from the side, like so, which I really, really like doing with my oracle decks, and they're glossy. That's the theme. Anyway, I purchased this as the deck and book set in 2023 when it came out. I believe for myself for my birthday, my 30th birthday. I could be wrong. This deck isn't about the myth of Lilith. It's more about the archetype of Lilith's myth as it is represented through the astrological landscape. So there's a lot of planets in here. There are Lilith through the zodiac signs and the shadow work that you do with Lilith. There's also the alchemical process cards within here. There's also a few archetype cards, like you have Mary Magdalene in here. There's Jezebel. There's Lilith herself, of course. And this, like I said, this isn't a deck that you would use to learn about the myth of Lilith. However, this is a serious, there's even here as well, which I appreciate. So this is a serious alchemy deck. One that you can use on a daily basis to understand the just energy of your day or to even clarify general readings. But it also works great in those bigger picture readings of like, what am I working through? What's the shadow that I'm dealing with? What am I not looking at? Why is this bothering me so much? What's the wisdom of this moment for myself? I don't find this deck works so much with past life alchemy, which you'll see a theme of a lot within my professional work and the professional cards that I had in that list. Here's the Lilith card. But this is very much like the here and now and working with those larger archetypal energies, but also the nuances of the shadow and really becoming whole again, as this says. And I really, really enjoyed this deck. Like I said, I wasn't sure I was going to like it, mostly because of the style of the artwork. It's just, it looks very video game-ish sometimes, like this card or this card. However, I don't find that the artwork isn't bad. It's just a different style than I'm used to, and I don't find that it detracts from the way that I use the deck at all. Like, it's totally fine. So I love that you can use this deck as it is. Like, you could just pull a card. This happens to be one of the alchemical cards, so it has the alchemical stage sublimation, and then it has a keyword or a key phrase, like here is Black Moon and Lilith in Libra. You deserve balance. So you can use these cards without the guidebook, but if you do choose to use the guidebook for the shortness of the book, it really is helpful. It's not super fluffy. It has a description of the card, and it usually has a type of shadow work prompt, and it also has it for like feminine and masculine energy, which I think is really interesting. When you go into more of the mythical cards, like this is Queen Jezebel, it actually like tells you about the myth a little bit, which I do appreciate. There is information in here on the planets and the different planets through the signs. So if you're new to astrology, with some study, you could definitely follow along. If you're new to alchemy, with some study, you could definitely follow along. If you're like me and you're kind of middle of the road with both of those things, like still a lot to learn, but you know the basics kind of thing, this is super helpful because there's enough in here to kind of prompt you and remind you if you don't know. But if you do know a little bit, then it's kind of a confidence booster, I guess. So that is the Black Moon Lilith Cosmic Alchemy Oracle. Moving on. Continuing on with the liminal theme, we have visions in the liminal space. This is, I believe, the only indie deck that I have on this list. I love this deck. This is one of those decks where you either get it or you don't. Like, plain and simple. This is one of those decks that's on like that more traditional playing card stock, like linen. It shuffles like a dream. I believe you can still find this. Last time I showed this, I know there were a couple of shops, like independent shops, that had this still stocked. So I will try to find somewhere that has it that I like can vouch for, I guess. Because sometimes buying can be sketchy, but this is just, it's dark, it's mysterious, it's otherworldly. It's one of those decks that like you have to decode. Like, it's not going to feed it to you, and it's not going to give it to you with a little kiss. It's going to be blunt. It's going to be honest. It's going to speak in riddles. And when it hits, it's going to be screaming in your face. This is a fantastic deck for that liminal space. You know that moment in Beetlejuice, the movie, where the main characters, I can't remember their names, but they're, dead, and they're going to get advice. They're like, the Book of the Dead doesn't make any sense, and they open the door and they like go and they're like waiting, and they're in this like weird liminal space where all of the other like ghosts are just trying to figure out how to like live life after death. This feels like that land. Like, it's unreal, it's weird, it's symbolic, but sometimes it doesn't make sense. It's macabre, but it's funny, but it's like not. This is that. It is the liminal space. It is the waiting room. And I love to use this when I need to make sense of the nonsensical, when I'm having such an intense internal experience that I just cannot put into human words, or when I'm feeling like this, the cosmic fuckery, when you're like, the energy's weird, I don't understand what's happening, I don't feel like myself, or things just feel intense. This is like your roadmap. Like, when shit goes haywire, this is going to tell you what's going on. But you have to be open to the craziness of this world, or else it's not going to make any sense to you. And like I said, it's also a tough love deck. Like, it's going to see your soul, and it's going to feel exposing. And if you're not ready to be exposed and caught in your bullshit, then this is not the deck for you. I feel like the way that I spoke about this deck itself was kind of in riddles. Like, you didn't get a whole lot of information about it, but that is literally the energy of this deck. This is one of my favorite cards, The Passing of Time. Here, this is this deck in a nutshell. The back rooms. Water has memory. Believe nothing you hear and half of what you see. You came here to help turn the lights off. Life is beautiful and meaningful. Strangely perfect timing. Hand in hand. Cord cutting. So it also has like some practical magical things in there. And then you have like more like blood sacrifice. Knock knock tick tock with all of the notifications. So that is Visions in the Liminal Space Oracle. One of my favorite decks. It's been on my favorite deck list before. It continues to be one of my favorites. It's not a daily rider. Again, it's for more of those like liminal transition times, but I do find I'm in those spaces many, many times a year for myself. So there's that. I'm going to continue kind of moving out of that energy, and then we're going to end with like the most practical decks that I use just for like for day-to-day stuff. So next on the list, we have Madame Endoras Fortune cards. This is a deck that I just like stumbled upon last year, and I'm thoroughly obsessed with this. Like, this is the deck that I always wanted. This is from, I think it's published in 2003, excuse me, from Monolith Graphics. It has that awesome thin cardstock, which I love. This one's more like cardboardy. It doesn't feel as nice in your hand. I shuffled it off camera so you couldn't see. It has kind of this tarot size, so even me with small hands, I can shuffle it, which I appreciate. Super bendy. Here are the backs. This is a really fun deck. Like, when I was a kid and I thought of like esoteric mysteries and like reading cards, this was the deck vibe that I thought of. There's like kind of folktale things. Like, here's the, how do you say that? The minstrel. And there's general cards like love, you know, the things we're used to. There's also elemental cards, which I adore. So there's earth, air, fire, and water in here, which also have the zodiac symbols. The zodiac signs that are associated with that particular element. There are animals in here. It's a really, really fun deck. It's got kind of that, like, again, gothic, castle, old-timey fortune teller, like, she's about to tell you you're gonna die. Don't go down that road kind of vibe. But again, it also has some of those Egyptian undertones. It's just a really, really fun and it's kind of a kitschy deck, but this deck you can take seriously. Like, it's not one of those decks that's just a novelty deck. Like, this is going to tell you some actual shenanigans that's going on. It does have that fortune telling vibe, so I don't use this deck as like an entire reading, but I do use it as like additional information or perhaps a theme or clarifier within a particular reading. I did also use this in my 2024 pick a card readings, like what you need to know before the end of the year, which I posted recently. So if you want to check out and see this like deck in action, you could check out that video. But it's a really, really great versatile deck, and the artwork is just so fun. The messages on the bottom can be a little harsh and don't always kind of go with what it is that you're reading about the archetype. So here we have the Green Man, the forces of nature favor you, which is fun. We have the Queen, love and prosperity. I'm not going to butcher the name of that. The Chimera, imagination clouds your judgment. The Seer, follow the intuition. The Sphinx, choose your words carefully. Sorry if I went off frame there. Hand of Fate. Black Cat. Of course, I'm not finding any examples of what I was talking about. Oh, here's one. A long journey brings reward, the stars. Now, I don't always read the star in that way. You can, but sometimes I will ignore that bottom message, both in personal and professional readings. But it's one of those decks that literally, I've never seen anyone else talk about this, and it's a friggin' gem, and I love it. It does have a little white book with it, which can be really fun. It like gives you the different categories. So like here's the bestiary cards. There's the treasury, which has kind of your accoutrement. There's the elements, and there's only just a couple of phrases, but it's really, really fun. There's several spreads in the back, and they're focused on like the seasons or the directions. There's the Seer's Fan or the Oracle of the World. They're really unique, and I love the elemental focus. I love the esoteric focus. I love like that fun fortune telling aspect without it being dysfunctional. Sometimes I feel like when you get fortune cards, it's like, you know, you'll meet someone tall, dark, and handsome, which is like not the readings that I do at all. So this one's kind of that happy medium between like feeling like you're going to see a fortune teller, but like actually just being able to read cards as I normally would. So it's Madame Endoras fortune cards. Next on the list are decks that I use when I'm still in that like liminal transition, but I'm more towards that like earthly side. So the first decks we talked about with like the Visions in Liminal Space, Black Moon, and Seasons of the Witch, that was all like in like deep internal work. Now we're getting a little more grounded, but we're still kind of in that transitory vibe. And one of the decks that I like to use during that time is the Earth Warriors Oracle. I got this again this spring, and this is one of those decks that I would never use in a client reading because it's an Alana Fairchild deck, and Alana Fairchild decks are fantastic if you want a message that you can sink your teeth into. So these are decks that you pull out when you're not in a position to channel your own messages. You really want a channeled for you message. You want something that's wordy and nurturing and feels like it's the fortune teller telling the story to you and giving you usually some fun ritual options within the book. And it's not something you're going to do a whole reading with. Like, I'm not pulling 3 cards from this deck and trying to interpret them without looking at the guidebook. Like, this is one where I'm going to pull a card and I'm going to look at the guidebook and I'm going to get messages from my guides. I'm going to get messages from the grandmothers of the land, from those that have walked before me, from that feminine leader archetypal energy that is this deck. It's super bright and colorful. It does feel very indigenous culture oriented. There are about 1 million names in here that I can't pronounce without being offensive, but there is something really beautiful about these cards. They can really take you to a place, and sometimes I just need a message. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you're just in that place where you're like, talk to me, babe. Talk to me, because I can't hear anything for myself, or I'm just in a tender spot, or like whatever it is. So this is a very gentle deck. It holds you. It's very wordy. Like I said, this is like you're going to want to sink into a long message. Like, you want to call your grandmother and have her tell you everything's going to be okay. Like, that's this particular deck. And again, like I said, this is one that I started working with this when I started doing a lot of ancestral work, and I didn't find that this connected me to my particular ancestors, but it does have that ancestral land guidance feel to it and can be really reassuring when you just need that, you know? I probably pulled from this deck a couple of times a month since I purchased it earlier this year, and it's one of those ones that I'm always like, oh, I'm going to put this on the shelf and like not touch it forever, and then one day I'll just be like, pull a card from me, and I do that. Along the same lines of the Earth Warriors Oracle, where I'm looking for a message that I really just want to sink into, where I'm like, I can't hear my own thing. I need you to like say something. But perhaps I don't want like 4 pages of guidebook to go through. I just want something quick and simple, but with the same kind of vibe. I hate to love this deck, but it's one of like my most used decks every single year. This is the Sacred Cycles Oracle. And I use it in this very particular way of needing a message that feels rooted and grounded in the earth, in the ancient ways, in the cycles of life, that feels very like crone, soothing message, you know? Again, this isn't one where I just pull a card and read it for like what it is. I'm not using this for clarification of any kind. It's more for pulling a card out and trying to understand things that are going on that I just don't, or I just need reassurance. There is, of course, the feminine reproductive cycle cards in here, but there's also solar cards, there's seasonal cards, there's moon phase cards, there are some animal guidance cards as well. And I do appreciate that even when you get, say, like you get the monarchy, that sounds wrong. Anyway, you know when you hear a word or you say a word or you look at a word and you're like, is that right? Or like you spell something out and it starts to look weird, even though it's like a word you spell all the time. That's how I felt in that moment. Anyway, what am I trying to say? Even with the cards that are perhaps more reproductive cycle focused, it doesn't feel overly like feminist. It also has pleasure cards in here, which I appreciate. But you can still get like a message from it, even if, say, you pull like the menstruation card and you're not at that particular phase. It doesn't feel like it's trying to tell you should be menstruating. You know what I mean? It feels like the guidebook is, I don't want to say generic, but like it's zoomed out enough that you don't feel like it doesn't resonate. Does that make any sense? I really like this crown card. So that is the Sacred Cycles Oracle. And again, like I said, the guidebook just has these really beautiful, shorter messages. And it also has like a journal prompt, and they're divided into the different sections. So like you have the physical body, ritual, animals, cycles of life, hormonal cycles, seasons, moon phases. And of course, it does have spreads in the beginning, most of which are, focused on cycles, but it does give you like a seasonal cycle. There's the sacred support cycle, which is either the moon phase or the menstrual phase. And then there's also inner child, present self, wise one, and higher self, which I find really fun. So there's that deck. And then moving on to more daily riders, I do have one deck that I use literally all the time, and I'm saving it for last. So stay with me there. But the next deck on the list is the Cowgirls and Aliens Oracle. I had the sun and this whole thing like fine for the other for the first video I did, and now it's all crazy again. So I'm hoping that's not too distracting for you. I'm just going to sit here with it in my eye and pretend it's not. So we have the Cowgirls and Aliens Oracle. This is one of those decks that I purchased and I was like, look, you had me at Cowgirls and Aliens, like, I'm in. But I was really worried that it would be too, like, mainstream, that it wouldn't feel very esoteric. It has these fun gilded edges. I was afraid that it wouldn't resonate with me, that it would be too just for fun. But this is actually a really well done deck and guidebook, I do have to say. If you are not esoterically inclined, which if you have landed on my channel and you're not, I don't know how, but if for some reason you aren't esoterically inclined, this is day-to-day practical enough that you could show someone this oracle deck and have them read the guidebook and they wouldn't be like, this is too woo-woo, which I hate that term, but anyway, you know what I mean. You know who I'm talking about. And if that's you, no shade. But that's just not me. But anyway, if you are esoterically inclined, this does give you enough to go on where you can get that kind of deeper esoteric feel with it, but it's also very grounded and practical. A lot of these cards are archetypes or roles that we play, and then it has some type of affirmation on the bottom. So this one says, the clones, I will accept life's contradictions and keep an open mind. The preacher, I will be open-minded and kind to others. The cowgirl, I am enthusiastic to learn and grow. So it does have that, like, you know, new agey, maybe that's the word I was looking for, like new agey, affirmation-ish, kind of surface level thing to it. But is this Undertaker not like so fun? You have the rancher, it's like stars and aliens and the Wild West, and it's such a fun novelty deck. But I'm going to show you the guidebook in just a minute. This has been so fun to use. This is one of those decks that like I would pull out at night or to do like my daily draw for the week with my husband to put out on the altar and just have like practical advice for the week going forward. So here we have the Space Pirates. You get a card reproduction, you get the affirmation, then you get the story of the card. So it explains what's going on in the actual image of the card and how that relates to the archetype or the person that the card is based after, which I so appreciate. You have the message, and then you have tips, which are like little action things. So you have the story. This is, let me find the space part. I have to read this to you. If you're not interested in this and you want to skip to ahead, then feel free to. But I plan to do a review of this deck because it's so much fun. So this is the space pirate. Story. Hey boss, they're stealing all our loot. The space pirate pauses, the glass of moon whiskey almost to her lips. A grin slowly spreads across her face. She's been waiting for another adventure through the galaxy. Things were getting quiet on this planet. Downing her whiskey, she jumps up, checks her ray gun is strapped to her belt, and yells across the busy interstellar saloon, "What are you waiting for, me hearties? Let's go get 'em! Yeehaw!" It's like so fun, right? Then we have the message. Since the space pirate is pure joy and freedom. She doesn't have a care in the world, an expert at rolling with the punches. She has a thirst for adventure and the whole galaxy at her feet. The space pirate is telling you to put aside your worries and responsibilities for a while and be in the moment. Here, there are no problems, only exciting challenges to overcome. Sometimes we can let our fears and anxieties grow until they overwhelm us. Do you want to let past regrets or worries for the future consume you? Maybe you can free yourself to enjoy this moment right now. The universe with all its shiny loot is out there waiting for you, so don't let your worries stop you from adventuring amongst the stars. Then it has tips. So the tips are: try changing your perspective on a challenge that faces you. Can anything good come out of it? Can it become an opportunity to learn and grow? Remember, nothing lasts forever. Staying mindful can help you avoid overthinking about the past or future. So it's just so fun because you have the story that like brings the card to life. Then you have like the practical advice, and then you have some like, you have the message, and then you have the practical advice. So this is a really fun deck, a hidden gem, one that I used a lot in 2024 and will continue to do so. Just as like a daily reader. And because of the affirmations on the bottom, even though I don't like to use it as affirmations, it does give you like a fun divinatory message if you choose to see it that way. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. All right, the second to last deck I've been using a lot is the Supernatural Oracle. And I have to be honest, I'm not sure about this deck yet. It made it on its list because while it's not like a favorite, I don't dislike it. And I have used it quite a lot. And I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about this deck. I've had a lot of requests for reviews of this deck, and I promise it is coming once I feel like I have a final opinion, I guess, on this deck. This is like an officially licensed Supernatural Oracle, and I've had the tarot for quite some time, and I really, really enjoy the tarot deck, while it does have some, pitfalls, of course. I was skeptical to get the Oracle because I was worried it was going to be kind of like the Cowgirls and Aliens. I had the same worry of like, oh, first of all, this is my favorite card in the deck, the Leviathan Blossom. Like, the fact that they thought to put this in here just brings me so much joy. Of course, we have a lot of the characters. That's the majority of the deck. But we do have other cards. Anywho, I was worried that it would be more of a novelty item, which, to be honest, it kind of is, but isn't. Again, I love that we have these other cards. So there's the Empty. Of course, you have the characters. You have Donna and Benny. You have the Bunker. I feel that the extra cards of different locations and like parts of the lore, like the Mark of Cain, the Winchester's Journal, like the fact that they chose these extra cards to put in here. I love this face for Jody. They did a really good job in that particular area. In terms of the characters, there are a few that I do pull out, especially like Eileen. And I'm like, who the hell is that? You know what I mean? But for the most part, the likeness of the character from the TV show does come through. Here's one that I'm like Gabriel, I don't know. Garth is in here. Castiel, of course. I appreciate the ghost facers are in here. They have to be. I love that. Here's Purgatory. Dean's Amulet. Kevin. They did not do Kevin justice. The Cult. This isn't supposed to be a review of this deck, but Angel Blade. And the anti-possession symbol. So jury's still out on this because I'm torn. I love that we have these extra cards of like, I can pull out like an anti-possession symbol and be like, oh, this is probably a message about protecting myself. Like, right? Like, that's pretty easy, as well as like the salt circle. Like you can kind of get those vibes. If you also are very familiar with the characters, of course, you could pull out Dean and think about embracing the archetype that Dean represents within a reading. Like that works. The guidebook, I don't know. For the most part, as I have been using this deck, have pulled the same characters over and over. That is not a fault of the deck by any means. Right, because there's multiple cards in here. I do find that happens to me sometimes with decks, and I usually end up passing them on because it just pisses me off. But I get Eileen a lot. So here's a great example. So Eileen Leahy, giving the Winchesters a run for their money from the start, Aileen was a fierce hunter with a great sense of humor and lightning-fast reflexes. Born in Ireland, she was orphaned as a baby by a banshee whose scream left Eileen deaf. Raised by a hunter, Eileen tracked the banshee that killed her parents, leading her to Kansas, where she met Sam and Dean. She succeeded in killing the banshee and saved Dean in the process. A bond between her and Sam grew out of mutual understanding and respect, and some playful banter allowed Sam's heart to open. Then you get so that's the lore of who she is, right, within the show. And then you get the divinatory meaning. So someone new already has or will soon come into your life. Eye roll. Who will be a catalyst of change for you, either directly or indirectly. They will encourage your introspection, whether this person stays or passes through. If you welcome the thrill of the reinvention process, positive change will follow. I don't like messages like that because the way that I read cards is not fortune-telling style. And to me, that's a very fortune-telling card message. I don't really jive with the you're about to meet someone, those kind of cards, you know what I mean? Or you're about to get a raise or whatever. I want to know what that means for my internal landscape and the things that I can control and how I can deeper understand myself. That's how I use my cards. So I don't find that I enjoy that part of the guidebook, but I'm going to continue working with this. And to be honest, there have been several times where I've pulled a card from this deck and I have felt deeply connected to the message that was in the book, and it actually did pertain. So part of my hesitation, I think, with this deck so far is the fact that I keep getting that particular card and it's that particular message. And no, I have not met anyone in my life that's going to change the course of everything. But yeah, I've used it. I will continue to use it. And I'm just trying to figure this deck out. So technically, it probably shouldn't have made it onto this list as a deck. But because I have been using it so much, it felt wrong not to include it. So this is Supernatural Oracle. Last but not least, my hands down most used Oracle deck of the year in both personal and professional practice, next to the Dreamgate Oracle, is the Witch's Moon Magic Oracle. For a long time, I was using the Queen of the Moon Oracle, and that was my number one go-to personal and professional. I used it in every single reading. And over time, I kind of fell out of love with that deck, especially as I came out of the witchy closet, as we should say, or one would say. And I really got away from that feeling like I needed to be new agey in order to be relatable and digestible. And since then, this deck has become probably my hands down favorite Oracle deck of all time. This is the kind of sister deck to the, I mentioned it earlier, the Witch's Familiar deck. It's by the same creators. This is a mass market deck. It's highly glossy. But this is like, it's so good. It has different kinds of magic. It talks to different phases of internal and external magic. It has seasons, it has moons, it has animals, it has witch vibes like nobody's business. This is one of my favorite cards, the Nocturnal Animals. This is like, to me, the card that signifies like messages from the animal world. This is just a really great everyday deck. Like, I can use this for literally any reading. I can use it to clarify. I can use it as the only deck in a reading. I can pull one card or like 20 cards and still understand the message. I can use it to understand bigger themes. I can use it to understand nuanced themes. I can use it to get practical action advice. I can use it for manifestation and spellcraft. You can literally use this deck for just about anything. And there's so many vivid colors in this. Like, the saturation in this deck is deep. Whereas it's bright, but it's not colorful. Like with the Earth Warriors, you get those like intense like oranges and yellows and everything. Here you get really intense blacks, but you also get these like really intense blues and reds and oranges, but they're in contrast with the black, and it just makes it so moody, and it helps the actual like color stand out more, I feel. This has that same kind of video game feeling to it sometime, but honestly, I don't even care. I love how many crows and ravens there are in this deck. I love how many outdoor scenes there are, like the woods and the moon appear in like so many cards. But each card feels unique unto itself, and it feels like a very empowering deck. I love this image. It's a very empowering deck. I love the keyword on the bottom. So you get the title and the keyword. So you can use this actually like in line with moon phases or whatever particularly happens to be on the card, or you can just look at the keyword. And I'm just thoroughly obsessed, like, to be honest. I just love this deck in personal readings, in client readings. This, it's so good. You do have some like Wicca flavored things, like you have the Horned God here. However, you know, I'm perfectly happy to just see this as, okay, this isn't the Horned God, but it is like the archetype of the Horned God within the forest. Like, you know, I can generalize it without it being too prescriptive, which I really appreciate. And I'm obsessed with this deck. And the guidebook is very similar to the animal one. So you have a little poem meaning, you have the guidance of the card, but then you also have like associations that you can use within your magic, which I really appreciate. So whereas in the animal deck, it describes how you can use the magic of that animal within practical workings. This will tell you like what phase it's associated with, what goddesses it's associated with, and a little like ritual suggestion that you can do that has to do with that. I don't always use the guidebook. When I do use it, it's really fun, but I find that this particular deck is, you don't need it. And I don't know what kind of sorcery they use on this gilding, but let me tell you, this gilding has held up better than any other gilded deck I have ever owned. A lot of the gilded decks that I get, I don't know if it's because I both side shuffle. So I shuffle like this if I can, or if it's a tarot deck, you know, I shuffle like normal if I can get my hand around it. And I also shuffle overhand. And I don't know what it is, but after like 3 or 4 shuffles of a lot of decks, the gilding like dings and chips and whatever, I've used the heck out of this deck, and the gilding is still almost perfect. So I don't know what Llewellyn did for this particular set of decks, but like, keep doing it, Llewellyn, because the gilding is just off the chain. So that is the Witch's Moon Magic Oracle, which brings us to the end of the video. I did not intend for this to be so long, but I hope that you enjoyed this in-depth look into the Oracle decks I used the most and / my favorites for 2024. Let me know in the description, not in the description box. Oh my goodness. There will be links in the description box if you would like to check them out. Let me know in the comments if you have any of these decks that also made it to your list, if you saw some that are now on your wish list, if you saw some where you just are like, that does not jive with me, I have a totally different experience with it. Any and all of the things. I love hearing the spectrum of how each deck speaks to each person differently, and just, it's so much fun. I love the nuances and the philosophy and all those fun things. So I look forward to chatting with you below. And I will see you again very soon for my tarot version of this video. So stay tuned. Take care, my loves.